Hi, thanks for joining us for another episode of Help Nobody Told Me. I am Jasmine Shapiro. I'm a realtor with Berkshire Hathaway Home Services. And my team member, Mindy Leonard, who is with Super Organized Spaces, and she's a home organizer, and we love working together.
Yes, we do. And then our guest today is Candace Meyers. Candace, thank you for joining us.
Thanks.
She is a family law attorney with Beermann. And please introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about what you do.
Sure. I am a partner at Beermann LLP. We are exclusively a family law firm. We do some appeals, but we represent clients who are going through divorces, have parenting matters if they weren't married. We focus on high net worth divorces, division of assets, the best way to divide retirement assets, parenting, custody disputes, high conflict cases. We draft and negotiate prenuptial agreements and postnuptial agreements, and we help folks with the allocation of college expenses when that time comes. And those are just a few examples of what we focus on.
And full disclosure, so everybody knows, I've been divorced for almost 4 years, and we met because Candace was my divorce attorney.
Yes.
And so if there's anybody who is doing what they're supposed to be doing in life, you are doing what you're supposed to be doing in life. You come at it forcefully yet empathetically. You know your stuff inside and out, and keeping things amicable. You think outside of the box. You offer a lot of different strategies to accomplish something, and I don't know. I mean, nobody wants to go through divorce, but you get somebody like you on your team, and you make it all the much better, all the better.
And it seems like you're still friends.
Yeah, exactly. Here we are, 4 years later. I call you a friend.
Agreed.
Yeah.
And I think that part of my practice and part of the satisfaction of this practice, because it is really, really challenging. I am dealing with clients who are feeling at their worst, whether they wanted the divorce or the breakup or they didn't. It is a challenge. It is a relationship that once was very much trust and love. And I often have clients who the person that they trusted most, they can't trust anymore. And so for me, the satisfaction and what I hope to bring to it is a little bit of me, which is empowering women and empowering men to take the next step, turn the page, next chapter, and look forward. I know with you, I remember our first phone call, and I remember you saying, I can't believe I'm having this phone call right now. And I said, we are going to get there one step at a time, and we did. And what I think most people don't recognize is there are more than one way to go about this. I think a lot of people see divorces on TV, or they see it in the movies, like Kramer versus Kramer. I don't know if I'm aging us, but
We relate.
it really doesn't need to be that way. And I feel very strongly that people should not be airing their personal information, whether it's financial or related to the children or substance abuse or anything like that, in a public forum. And so there are process options that, like alternative dispute resolution options, in order to keep it discreet and keep it private. And I think educating more people on other options besides going to court and arguing and being in front of a judge and spending excessive amounts of money to not feel great, people need to be educated on that. And so that's what I try to start my consultations with.
And you accomplish that goal because that's what you do.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Go ahead.
Were you always in family law and divorce law?
Always.
Always.
So I went to law school, graduated 20 years ago. I've been licensed for 20 years, actually this November.
Congratulations.
That's great.
I knew that I wanted to be in a courtroom. I wanted to do litigation. I had this vision of advocating and having clients. So the options were criminal defense or being an ASA, which is a prosecutor, or divorce law. I just felt within me, I've always been an advocate. I've always had the oxygen in my lungs and have stood up for what I believe in. And I thought, I want to represent people who, can't speak for themselves or do not have the power to speak for themselves. So it just was like a natural decision for me to get into family law. I'm able to put on two different hats. You have the intelligence in the academics, but then you also have the emotional intelligence component. And I feel like for me, naturally, being an extrovert, it was something that it does feel very natural to me.
And I think you said too, rewarding.
It's rewarding. It's satisfying.
Right.
Like day in, day out, it's exhausting. You get empathy fatigue, carrying the pain and burdens of my clients. It isn't easy.
Yeah.
But I have great partners and great colleagues that either at my firm or at other firms that I can lean on, and we get through it and hopefully help people, move on to the next chapter. So.
And you're very collaborative too. When you said, you mentioned other firms and that kind of thing. I mean, you have such knowledge of so many attorneys who are outside of Beermann, right? And they're just in other places. And so that's really nice too, because I don't know, I think it makes the process more collaborative, smoother, and that kind of thing. I mean, judges and attorneys and all of that. 20 years you've been doing it.
Right. And I think, listen, I don't want to Pollyanna my personality and my practice. I get feisty. I lose my temper. I get frustrated. But I do think the strategy of building relationships really does pay off. And I mean, as a real estate broker, having the relationships with the other brokers, with the real estate attorneys, with the other professionals such as, Mindy, who does the specific organization and staging, it makes a big difference in the client's process. And I've been doing this for 20 years. I probably will be doing it for another, 30. It makes it real miserable life if you are constantly fighting, because I'm already representing clients that are fighting.
Right.
So.
Right. No, and we keep bringing this theme up, I feel like, in all of our podcasts about relationship-based and our team. And we put together our team. These are people that I would use personally or have used personally. I'm not just telling a client, go use this painter or this electrician or this attorney.
Right.
These are people who I really trust. And, I believe that you do the same thing when you're collaborating.
And it's not just the collaboration and the fluff. I really tried to build my practice on knowing the law and knowing the statute and knowing the case law. So then when and if I have to go to court, I am armed with that information, because isn't that leverage when you actually do know what you're trying to negotiate, and kind of the tricks of, we can draft this agreement to set forth A, B, or C, or to give my client the 3 different options and not just say, you have to do this, you have to stay in the marital home, you must buy your spouse out. No, there are other ways. Maybe, and I'm sure that you deal with this a lot. I deal with this a lot. People don't want to refinance their houses because interest rates are very different than what they were several years ago.
Yes.
Well, I can negotiate something a little different, a little more creative, if the other side has the willingness to be flexible. We don't have to refinance immediately. We can let the children graduate from high school and then work out a credit for the principal reduction in the mortgage instead of an immediate refinance, which may be an extra $1,000, an extra $2,000 a month on the mortgage.
Right.
So besides being an attorney, you're also a mediator.
Yes.
So can you explain what that means? Because that's something I think people don't really understand.
Right. I think people hear the word mediation and they think that I am going to be the one to decide for them, or it's a mini judge. So what mediation is, and what I did, I took a 40-hour course at Northwestern University, specifically family law. A mediator is a third-party neutral that facilitates the conversation and reaching agreements between two parties. Mediation can be attorney assisted, so you have spouse A and spouse B with their counterpart counsel, or it can be just spouse A and spouse B, and it really depends on the power dynamic. I really love when my clients are in mediation and I can give them kind of information in the background to arm them to go into mediation with knowledge, with ideas. I think it just benefits their case, and you don't have attorneys sitting there who might inflame the situation. Listen, if you have great professionals, you could be so collaborative, but it really depends on the personalities and the chemistry, and there's layers of emotional issues that go into the parties and the attorneys. Surprise, we have egos too. So you can mediate with an attorney. Like I do mediation, I do private mediation. Retired judges are often mediators. They retire from being on the bench and they specifically can choose their cases. And then there are folks that don't represent parties and are professional mediators, as opposed to me, who will take off my mediation hat and be an advocate hat.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's nice to have those options.
And it's private. It's discreet. It's confidential. So you'll sign a mediation agreement that it is a settlement conversation and it cannot be used in court. And the goal is to reach agreements in a private setting. So whereas court are public records, you're filing public records that anyone can see. In mediation, it is confidential. So when there are substance abuse issues or issues with special needs children, for me, I believe that keeping that in a private, discreet setting is so important.
So if a couple goes through mediation,
Yeah.
if I'm understanding you correctly,
Yeah.
that information that came, let's say they didn't come to resolution during the mediation, that cannot be used in court?
Correct.
Okay.
And so what they would do is we can pivot in and out. It isn't, if you can't reach an agreement, you do have to seek a judge's recommendations, or you have to put on a trial, but you can go in and out. And sometimes we start a case where it's really high conflict and the attorneys talk and say, how about we back this up and go into mediation? But what the mediator would do or should do is a memorandum of understanding, and then the attorneys will draw up a formal agreement and end the case.
Okay. Interesting.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it is.
So how can couples protect themselves financially during and after the divorce process?
So I would say protect yourself before. I mean, oftentimes folks come in and they're blindsided by the breakdown of the marriage, so you really can't do that advanced planning. But to the extent that you have access to tax returns and bank statements and credit card statements and know the day-to-day operations of the household, more information is better. And I would say, even if you don't understand the information, an average person doesn't know or understand how to read a tax return. But having the tax return and having appropriate professionals help answer those questions, and knowing the professionals to choose in order to help that, just gathering the documents is the most important thing. I have a lot of people who come to my office and they say, I don't have access to anything. I have no idea what my spouse has been running this household. I don't even know what we have. And they're panicked, panic-stricken.
I would be too.
I approach it as if, it isn't the first time that conversation has come across my desk, and we deal with it. We start with tax returns. We start with a financial disclosure statement, which is required in the state of Illinois. And then we just start unraveling the different layers. And we see that there's a bank account. Well, we can always request the bank account information from the other side, or we can send a subpoena. Then you look at the subpoena records and you see, oh, well, there's a transfer from this bank account to this bank account. You send another subpoena, and that way we educate our clients on what the comings and goings are of the parties' finances.
So if somebody is thinking about doing this or heading down divorce, if it's, whether it's a surprise like you were just mentioning, you know, it's such sudden, like an urgent thing, or if they're considering it, what are the steps they should take?
So,
You're a good attorney.
and interview a couple attorneys, right? Like, sometimes people will talk to me and I welcome them to call somebody else. You know, maybe it's not the right fit, but first of all, like, keep your circle of trust very tight, okay? I think everyone thinks that they know about divorce and they had a cousin or they had a neighbor, and I think you really have to be very specific about who you share and who you trust. Because I won't get into stories, but it can really unravel on somebody. I think you keep your personal information off of social media. I think everyone is looking, and you really do want to kind of be in protective mode with yourself, with your kids, just the whole gamut. And then finances, lean in, figure out what your needs are, what assets you have. Do the very best that you can in getting that knowledge, and don't panic, because there are professionals that will help. And change your passwords.
P.S.
Change your passwords.
Yes.
Yeah. Don't
Then
underestimate.
you got to remember them once you change them.
What, you have to remember what the passwords are.
Right.
Isn't that always the issue,
Yes,
is remembering your password?
But everyone is in each other's emails and devices, and
Yeah.
yeah.
What about the pandemic? How did that impact divorce rates?
So the first thing I was concerned with the pandemic was domestic violence. You know, in my head it was, and I'm not trying to be gender biased, but I'm going to use this as an example. You know, what happens when you have a traveling spouse who is gone all the time, and you have young children in the house, and the traveling spouse is home now, and that traveling spouse has a very alpha personality, and that traveling spouse never knew what the stay-at-home parent was doing, and so now they're criticizing, and now they're stressed out because their business might implode because we had no idea.
Right.
And you have the stay-at-home spouse who was running the household in the way that they felt, you know, what the parties agreed. And so it became sort of this pressure cooker that I was very concerned about at the onset in March of 2020. So then it became a lot of substance abuse, because whether people were bored, whether people were scared, the election doesn't help people's temperature. We had a lot of breakups and conflict over political ideology.
Wow.
We had conflict over vaccination. One party wanted, one party didn't want, whether it was for the children or themselves. We had folks that were in the medical field, and just the overall fear.
Right.
Okay, so then we had the fear of the economy, and no one knew what sort of apocalypse was happening.
Right.
Okay.
Are we ever going to see an end?
No one
Right.
knew.
Yeah.
Okay, and then you're like, do I
Remember
want to be
those
stuck with
days.
this person?
Right.
Right.
Okay, so then it was like the summer of 2021 where everyone was like free.
Right.
It was the summer of something. And so and then everyone's free and like going back to like actually seeing people, and like coworkers who you're having this like flirtatious, you know, text messages with, and then like all of a sudden you're back in the office. So like I see a stream of that. Again, the substance abuse is still reigning. And then we have just general conflict. The courts took a little while to get up to speed. So folks just didn't know how to be. And there were not methods to deal with the conflict other than mediation and collaboration. And so attorneys who were not doing mediation were sort of scrambling and had to like sit down in a mediator's office. Mediation was on Zoom. And
Right.
like, how do you get anything done on Zoom when you can just go off screen, or who knows who's in the background? So we had a lot of that. And I will say now, we are still seeing massive COVID overflow
Wow.
from all of those different things.
Those are such valid points that I didn't even think about.
And then, I mean,
Right.
forget about children
Right.
who just suffered through the pandemic and the learning challenges and the social emotional issues and the neurodivergence. Yes. So,
That was bringing back a lot of memories too, like
I
thinking
know.
about how scary those
I
pandemic
know.
times were.
I know.
'Cause
I know.
no one knew.
I know.
Right.
We had no idea. But,
No one knew.
Right.
And I would get phone calls from new clients who would hire me sight unseen, which, great. I guess my voice is good.
Right.
Only the listeners will be the ones to determine that today. Like just really a lot of desperation. And
Because you might have a fight with your spouse or your partner, and you kind of maybe go to separate areas of the house, but then the next day you leave, you do your thing.
Right.
You're not stuck together where
Right.
you cannot leave.
right.
And I think that would probably escalate things.
Yeah, I mean, I was working from home quite a lot. My husband was a employee that worked outside the home, but I had two little kids. And so I was working, taking conference calls, being on court Zooms, and had these little kids that were
Right.
doing their thing.
Right.
Nice to be back in the office.
Yeah, oh, absolutely. Yes.
Do you do a lot of divorces for seniors? I mean, is that something that is more prevalent than it used to be, or what's the status of that?
So I will say it runs the gamut. I will go through a flux of a lot of young prenups, and then I'll go in a flux of a lot of like young families with toddlers. I get a lot of folks who are empty nesters who are like, okay, I don't have anything to say to my spouse anymore now that the kids aren't in the house anymore, or I don't have anything in common with them because when we met, I was 25 and now I'm 55. But then there is a range of folks who are older and are trying to figure out how do they live the twilight of their life? What do they want that to look like? And you have one spouse maybe who isn't as physically able and isn't as healthy emotionally or physically, and you have one who is like 70 going on 50. And you have that dynamic. Or you have a spouse who is normally the breadwinner retired and really doesn't know what their self-worth is anymore and has become, very angry and disillusioned with what retirement looks like. So I see domestic violence and abuse with seniors. I see seniors who have made a nice nest egg and they just really want to live their twilight in separately. Maybe they don't want to hear their spouse complaining anymore.
And then I've heard stories about, the husband maybe went to work or traveled all the time, and the spouse was home. And all of a sudden now, the retired husband is home and questioning, and what are you doing? And all of that.
Yeah.
And it can be very irritating because
It's irritating for both of them.
Right.
Right?
Why are you questioning me?
The one who is working doesn't know what their worth is anymore. They may have been an attorney in the corner office, barking orders at associates. We don't do that. And, the stay-at-home spouse who had their, canasta game and their pickleball is now like, please get out of my hair.
Right.
And that's like kind of the sugar-coated version of it. Not that divorce is sugar-coated, but like there can be some deeper issues.
Yeah.
Like there can be some early onset dementia where there becomes some real anger issues. And so some things that we, deal with is, does the person have capacity to get divorced and sign the paperwork? And how do we manage that? And, bringing in a guardian and really having that conversation where you have someone who is very lucid and very with it, and maybe another spouse who isn't. And is that conscionable?
Yeah.
And do they have the family support? So
if a guardian is needed, is that something the court appoints, or is that something that you do?
So that is something where I have trusted professionals who are other attorneys, and they are referred to that. Okay. So that is, I know enough to send to another trusted professional. My antennas go up when I feel and I hear facts that don't make me feel comfortable that maybe there is full capacity, and then I send that to a professional who has that expertise. Yeah.
So you sound like us. You're wearing a little bit of a therapist hat at
yes,
times.
a lot of a therapist hat.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So can we circle back to the empowerment?
Yes.
After the divorce. 'Cause
Yes.
I never heard an attorney talk about that, and I would love to hear what you have to say about that.
Okay, so I'm going to start with what you are not going to expect. And that is a dad who feels like they've been marginalized from parenting the kids. And, to really empower my dad clients and say, you know what, you weren't the one who made the doctor's appointments, and you weren't the one who baked cookies for the bake sale, but you are just as important of a parent as the mom, and how to lean into that and how to give your children a full the confidence that they should have in two parents who love them so much. But the empowerment that you probably would think of from my initial conversation was empowering women who didn't deal with the finances, and maybe were belittled by their lack of financial acumen. And maybe they're teachers or they're social workers, and they aren't business people. They aren't negotiating deals all day long. Giving them the empowerment that do not feel sorry for yourself. You are going to move on. You are going to line up with trusted professionals who are going to give you the information that you need. You don't need to know how much you require to retire. You are going to choose a trusted wealth advisor who is going to run the numbers with you. And this isn't choosing professionals who do it for you, it's with you.
I love that. I love that statement. Can you repeat that?
Hope so.
It's not
It's not choosing professionals that are doing the work for you.
right
It's not choosing a lawyer that does the work for you,
Right.
or a broker that does the work for you. It's with you.
with you
I-
so that you learn.
So that you learn it. Like, my clients are part of the team. I'm not dictating that they must go down this road. I give them 2-3 options. They choose. This is their life.
Right.
It's not my life.
But
And
it's empowering with them when you give them the
Yes.
tools.
yes,
That's
Yeah.
even baby steps, just giving them options at the
Yes.
beginning.
Yeah.
That's a baby step to empowering them, because
Yeah.
you're giving them a little control in a situation that is very much out of control.
yeah, right.
And it's overwhelming. Sometimes you can't see it, straight.
No,
Right.
Because there's so many emotions involved.
people come into my office and it's like they need to record me, because it's like going into a doctor's office, hearing that you need to have surgery, and your head is just spinning. I sit there and I talk to these new potential clients, and I know that they aren't comprehending, and not because they're not intelligent, but this is so emotionally, it takes another part of their brain.
Sure.
So I stop and I'm like, okay, let's back up and really, where are we caught up on this? What don't you understand? Let's take a break. So I try to be really cognizant of that, because it's a tough time. I had a client who reached out to me, and I don't know what was going on with the family, but it was, I'm going to say 6 or 7 years later. And she said, thanks to you, we're co-parenting so beautifully, and you gave me such good advice.
Oh my gosh, that
And
must have made your day.
it made my day. I reached out to her, and I was really took my breath away,
Yeah.
that she reached out to me, because it really does make a difference, because I do feel like sometimes I'm on a hamster wheel, like swimming upstream from, the other fish
Right.
in, heavy in conflict. So, we do the best that we can, and, I hope that I am making a difference for my clients and that they can move on in a productive way.
Well, I feel your compassion. So I can only imagine when you are in a situation where you're not just being interviewed, but you're in a tough situation. I can only imagine how compassionate you must be towards your client. And I know that
Yes.
Mindy was very
Yes.
excited to have you come on the podcast today.
Yeah.
We haven't gotten through half our questions, so we want you to come back again
Okay.
and
I
do
would
a
love
part
to.
2. We will have all of Candace's contact information in our show notes. So if anybody needs to reach out to you and your firm, they will be able to get a hold of you.
Okay.
And we thank you so much for
Thank
joining
you for having
us
me.
today.
This was a pleasure.
Thank you. Thank you for everything, not just today.
And please subscribe and follow our podcast and tune in next week for another episode of Help Nobody Told Me.